previous two videos, we discussed how intermittency can be overcome with renewable energy by interconnecting grids. But what I didn't necessarily make clear was that batteries are integral to that solution, as even if you have integration, you'll still get variations in demand, so this needs to be dampened. As you can see here in this video, batteries are that solution, hence why we looked at the 3-hour battery cases aligned with our North and South American studies. Luckily, we already have a long history of battery usage in the form of hydroelectric power, so integrating batteries already work on the same general principles that we're used to. I'm going to go through some of the history of batteries and then how different batteries function and work, and give a general overview of them, so you can check the timestamps to skip to the parts that you're actually interested in. When looking towards a sustainable future, intermittency is clearly standing in the way. In the previous videos, we explored how interconnected grids can help us harness wind and sun more effectively. One critical piece of the puzzle that I didn't put enough emphasis on is batteries. Batteries are the unsung heroes for the ebbs and flows that energy demand provide, ensuring that when the sun sets or the wind is calm, our lives continue uninterrupted. Balancing energy isn't new, it has a long history of usage in the form of hydroelectric power. The principles are global, time-tested, and ready to be scaled. Deep diving into the subject gave me PTSD from my chemical engineering undergrad, adiabatic systems, and isotherms. I'm just glad there was no mention of fugacity. Let's start with a little history of batteries. As you can see in this table, there's a long storied history dating back to 1839 when the first fuel cell was developed. These battery systems have continually been updated and improved on at various speeds over various years depending on the interest and the capital put into them. Lithium-ion batteries obviously have been getting the most press over the last few decades, but there's a long history of a whole bunch of different systems. To cover this topic, we're going to split the batteries into different classes, since I can't cover every single battery of every type. Those classes are broadly thermal energy storage, TES, that's like heating, cooling, melting, condensing; mechanical energy storage, MES, pumped hydro, flywheels, anything that stores potential energy in a physical rather than chemical way, really. Then chemical energy storage, things like hydrogen or syngas; electrical chemical storage. This is typically what we associate with batteries, anode plus cathode plus ion transfer to output energy. This is where most of the attention is put when we think of batteries. And then electrical storage systems. Yeah, these are really interesting systems that use electromagnetic fields and capacitors or magnets. Jumping right into thermal energy storage, we have 4 main topics we're going to cover. Sensible heat storage. So this is the most common system. It stores heat energy without phase change. Think a hot water in a pressure vessel. Generally, they have large storage capacity, low construction costs, and can be expanded quickly. They can be geographically constrained, prone to corrosion, and have poor response times. A personal favorite of mine is molten salt. They're really common in solar thermal energy plants and new age nuclear plants. They're able to operate at atmospheric pressure because they're basically just warmed up like salt, halite, things like that. A little bit more complicated, but the low temperature salts are around 290 Celsius, and then they warm up to 550 Celsius. And then those salts generate steam for turbines. One of the issues is it's not the most efficient system. Latent heat storage, LHS, or phase change materials, PCM, they utilize heat absorbed or released during the phase changes, typically going from solid to liquid. Welcome to half of my engineering degree. This is done in cooling tanks with a host of substances. The benefit is that you get to hold the system at a constant temperature as the energy is stored in the compound itself, the water or the PCM. And then finally, we have thermochemical energy storage, TCES, where we take advantage of energy stored in chemical bonds, just like the combustion of gasoline. These are relatively complex systems and in a bit of an earlier stage of development, but it holds promise as they're generally solid, which means their energy can be stored for long periods of time with really high energy density. Moving on to mechanical energy storage, spinning stuff. Pumped hydro storage, basically just hydroelectricity. Welcome to BC, Manitoba, or Quebec. It's by far the most widely used energy storage system. It's not even close, but it obviously has this issue of being geographically constrained. But that can be mitigated by transmission lines. See my previous video. Gravity storage is like pumped hydro, but uses weights and pistons. Compressed air storage, CAES, as the name states, is basically just energy held through compression. It can be produced relatively inexpensively and also be implemented almost anywhere, but typically it requires natural gas as a heat source and its efficiency isn't great. Flywheel energy storage, FES, another personal favorite of mine, basically spinning wheels in a vacuum. Energy is added, they spin faster. When energy is removed, they slow down. Their capital costs can be quite high though. They have high cycle life, high power outputs, short response times. So when paired with other systems, it can mitigate some of these higher costs due to the benefits that they incur. Chemical energy storage, CEES. We look at 3 main categories: hydrogen storage, where you convert water into hydrogen for storage, then reclaim it in a fuel cell. The main issue is that it costs a lot to make this hydrogen. Realistic efficiencies are like 30 to 60% for hydrogen. Then when we look at a vehicle, it gets even a little bit worse. You're going to put in about 55 kilowatt hours of energy just to produce the green hydrogen and then compress it so that it can be put into a car. Then you're only getting about 15 kilowatt hours of energy out of this green hydrogen system. Realistically, that's why green hydrogen is in the order of $12 to $15 per kilo. Synthetic natural gas storage, kind of syngas, it's where you take biomass and create natural gas out of it. It's a widely used technology, but it's not the best in regards to sustainability and CO2 emissions, but it still definitely has a place. And then solar fuels, basically just copying nature, converting sunlight and CO2 into carbohydrates that can then be stored as energy. Artificial photosynthesis. Now moving on to electrochemical energy storage, EcES. This is a humongous topic of tons of batteries, and I am certainly going to miss some people's favorite batteries in this. There's a myriad of them. They're all over the place. They're being developed all the time. I have no idea which one is going to shake out and be the best. It's going to be a mix of things that are good in different scenarios, and the best system's going to win. This is kind of a battle of capitalism, if nothing else. So battery energy storage, BES, that's what we normally think of. Lead acid batteries, lithium ion, nickel cadmium, sodium sulfur, sodium ion, metal air, and then solid state batteries. They all work on the same basic principle. Ions are transferred from the cathode to the anode when charging, and vice versa when discharging, causing a flow of electrons to produce that energy. For most batteries, the medium is just an aqueous solution, but in the case of solid state batteries, they're really interesting because the medium is solid, making it a bit safer and a bit more environmentally friendly. Because if it breaks, you're not getting the medium spilt on you, which very often is acidic. Air batteries have extremely high potential energy densities, making them very attractive, but again, still in earlier stages of development and have some other issues associated with them. I'm a particular fan of sodium-based batteries, mostly because sodium is way more abundant than lithium, and so it's more secure from price shock. As far as I've found, sodium batteries aren't quite as energy dense, so their position is more for battery storage and not vehicles. There's a high variability in what's going to predicate what type of battery you want, but life cycle length is really important in storage systems. Another type of battery is called flow battery energy storage, FBES. The most common probably being vanadium redox batteries, but there's also polysulfide bromide batteries and zinc bromide batteries. It's basically a dual electrolyte system separated by a semi-permeable barrier that transfers the ions. Vanadium batteries have quite a long history and can store energy for long periods of time. They can kind of keep what's called inertia in your system quite well, but they have quite low energy densities. And then finally, we have electrical energy storage, ESS. We'll start with electrostatic energy storage of capacitors and supercapacitors. Basically, you hold energy in an electrostatic field that typically have really high energy densities, and these are used in cases where you need really short-term energy storage with lots of charge-discharge cycle capacity, making them a really good candidate for combining with other types of technology. They're able to maintain the proper frequency that we need in our power grids. Magnetic energy storage and superconducting magnetic energy storage systems, SMES. The energy stored in magnetic fields, they have really fast response times, high efficiency, high power outputs, and they're generally good for load leveling and system stability as well. And then finally, you get hybrid storage systems where you mix and match these different types of technology to get the best outcome and ideally the cheapest prices, because you can maximize the strengths and minimize the weaknesses of the different battery types. This might be something where you mix wind energy with pumped hydro and supercapacitors. Broadly, it's just important to make sure you use the right battery for the right job. There's going to be no one-size-fits-all solution. And then when we talk about what we care about, for cars, we care a lot about energy density, and to a lesser extent, cycling capacity, since you're really only cycling it once a day. Range is generally king, and by that extent, energy density. But for battery storage, energy density matters a whole lot less. It's just traded off with a larger footprint. So overall installed cost and reliability is what matters. This is why I'm more interested in sodium than lithium, because it brings the cost down. Or liquid metal battery formulas like Ambry's calcium antimony formulation, or Amprius's silicon anode technology that can potentially reduce charging times by orders of magnitude, and it can also help us move away from the carbon anodes dominated by China. Overall, there's a battery chemistry and solution for every power need that we're going to run into. It's just the job of engineers like myself to help use the right technology in each situation. I wanted to do a quick example of a wind and battery storage system. So I'm gonna show the economic analysis done by Lazard and then show you the analysis that I'm doing. But note that Lazard uses a lot more finance systems that I'm not going to utilize here. Basically where you put your taxes, how having deficits can bring your tax forward, things like that. I'm not gonna do all of that. That adds a fair bit of value to the analysis. But nevertheless, this gives you an idea of how much batteries are gonna add to a system cost. So what I have here is just some basic parameters and then a net present value analysis over here. I'm not really going to use the post-tax values because again, they're subject to a lot of other kind of weird tax systems that would happen on a renewable system or a fossil fuel system. It doesn't really matter. This is all unsubsidized. So we'll just look at the pre-tax values to get a bit rougher of an idea. So we can use wind costs around the average of about $1,350 per kilowatt hour, and then lithium ion battery costs of about $300 per kilowatt hour. About in line with where they are now. Lithium ion batteries about $150 per kilowatt hour, but all installed into a battery system are about $300. Then we'll use a 40% capacity factor for wind, and then we're going to target around 12% IRR, same as the Lazard study. Same as the Lazard study as well, we'll use 175 megawatts of storage, and then we'll look at different storage scenarios. So I'm just using a half hour of storage to align it with my previous video. We'll put this up at 3 hours. And then using this, we can just calculate how much storage capacity would be installed. So in this case, 210,000 kilowatt hours. And then from there, you get about the total capital cost, so around $300 million for this system that we've got here. And then operating costs, I have around $25 per kilowatt hour for the wind system and the battery system. That's about in line with the Lazard study as well. They're called the O&M costs. If we remove the battery one, it's about 4.4. The O&M in the low case was about 3.5. I think that aligns with this being 20. Anyway, so 25. Tax rate doesn't really matter. And then discount rate, this is just how net present value is calculated. You have to add a discount rate. So I'm using 8% here. Basically, it discounts the time value of money. So the higher the discount rate, the more value it puts on earlier stages. And then this is like the objective function. So what price point are we setting the power costs at such that we can achieve that 12% IRR? So in this case, we're only achieving 6.5, so we need this to be about 0.1. We get around the IRR we're looking for. So at 10 cents a kilowatt hour with a battery system that's relatively expensive, we're able to produce power and do it economically with wind. Up here, I have the capital costs. The Lazard study split them across the 2 years here. So I did the same, about 40% here and 60% here. That could be for a couple of reasons. One, it could be just like cost splitting or capital splitting, where maybe you only pay the contracts once your plant is completed, things like that. But anyway, that's the way that they did it, so that's the way that I did it. And then you just get your cash flow. So it's just the cumulative effect of your revenues versus your capital costs and your operating costs. And then your cash flows are just the summations of those across the systems. But then we can do some sensitivities here. What if we have really cheap wind? So down kind of near the bottom of about $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Well, now our IRR is a lot higher, so we can probably get away with 0.09, maybe even less, 0.08. Yeah, and so now it's 8 cents a kilowatt hour instead of 10 cents a kilowatt hour to get the same return on investment. And then what if lithium ion batteries go down to some of those projections of $50 or $20? Well, when we do that, we get even better IRR results. This comes down from 0.06 or 8 down to probably 0.06, no, 0.07 in these areas, and you're able to reduce the costs further and further and further. Also, wind and battery systems generally aren't very operating cost intensive. They kind of just run. Almost all of their costs are associated with the capital. So if these come down, say to 20, say to 8, something like that, you get even better economic results. And you can see how you can play with the numbers and you can get different outcomes for these systems on different results of if we can get these costs down, if we can get these different systems down, how much does it benefit our overall case? And you can see that batteries going from about 300, it's going to be in the order of 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour that we're going to reduce the total costs when we bring the battery costs down. Yeah, I hope this example kind of helps to show like how battery costs are associated with the cost of energy systems. Thanks for listening. This was just a broad overview of battery chemistries and battery information. I'll link the main sources that I use if you want to read up about anything that I specifically linked. And then let me know down in the comments if there's any battery chemistry you really want me to delve deeper into. Thank you.